My parents burned their own store and framed me for insurance money, but cameras exposed them all. Hey, buckle up, because this story has more betrayal than a daytime soap opera and more plot twists than a thriller novel. We are talking about my own parents trying to send me to prison, my girlfriend of 3 years choosing my brother over me, and a conspiracy so stupid that the investigators could not believe adults actually planned it. Grab some snacks because this is going to be a long one. So I, 26, male, grew up as the invisible second son in a family where my older brother Derek, 29, male, was basically treated like royalty. You know those families where one kid can do no wrong and everyone else just exists to support that kid's narrative? Yeah, that was my childhood in a nutshell. I was the forgotten son, the afterthought, the one who existed just to make Derek look better by comparison. Growing up in the Palmer household was like being a background extra in someone else's movie. Derek was always the successful one in my parents' eyes, not because he actually accomplished anything remarkable, but because he had this gift for talking himself up while doing the bare minimum. The guy could fail a test and somehow convince my parents he was victimized by a biased teacher. He could crash a car and make it sound like he was the hero who survived a dangerous situation. He could show up late to everything and still be praised for making it work. Meanwhile, I would bring home straight A's and get told I needed to apply myself more like Derek supposedly did. I would work my butt off at extracurriculars and barely get a nod of acknowledgement. I would help around the house without being asked and receive nothing but criticism about what I did wrong. Let me paint you a detailed picture of what life was like. When Derek was 16, he crashed my dad's truck into a mailbox while texting. Not just a little bump either. He completely demolished the mailbox, cracked the truck's bumper, and knocked out a headlight. My parents' response? They bought him his own car within 1 month because he needed to learn responsibility with his own vehicle. Their logic was that if he had his own car, he would take better care of it. Spoiler alert, he did not. He wrecked that car too within 8 months. When I was 16, I got a part-time job bagging groceries at the local supermarket. I worked every weekend and 3 evenings a week during the school year. I saved every single paycheck for 2 years to buy a beat-up Honda Civic with 180,000 miles on it. My parents' contribution? $0. Their response when I drove it home? Just do not expect us to pay for the insurance or gas. You have a job now. Meanwhile, they were still paying for Derek's insurance even though he was 19 and had totaled 1 vehicle already. The favoritism went beyond just material things. It was woven into every aspect of our family dynamic. Every conversation revolved around Derek. Every family gathering centered on his achievements, no matter how minor. Every holiday was a celebration of whatever Derek was doing at the time. Christmas was always a Derek celebration with me as an afterthought. I still remember this one Christmas when I was 14. Derek's pile of presents was stacked so high it looked like a store display. New gaming console, latest games, designer clothes, an expensive watch, gift cards worth hundreds of dollars. My pile? 4 packages, a sweater 2 sizes too big, a pack of socks, a gift card for the grocery store where I worked, Real Creative Mom, and a copy of some self-help book about reaching your potential. Nothing I had asked for, nothing that showed they knew anything about my actual interests or hobbies. When I looked disappointed, Mom just said, "Derek is graduating soon, he needs things for his future." Never mind that I was also a high school student with my own future to think about. Never mind that I had given her an actual list of things I wanted, most of which were cheaper than the stuff Derek got. The double standards extended to everything. When Derek got a D in calculus, my parents hired him a tutor, blamed the teacher, and eventually got the grade changed through a series of complaints to the principal. When I got a B+ in advanced placement history, my dad said he was disappointed and asked why I was not trying harder. A B+ apparently showed a lack of effort, while a D deserved sympathy and support. When Derek stayed out past curfew, my parents assumed he was just having fun with friends and told him to text next time. When I came home 15 minutes late from my job because my manager asked me to stay and help close, I got grounded for 1 week. Apparently, work was not a valid excuse, but Derek's social life was sacred and untouchable. I still remember this one time in 10th grade when both of us had events on the same Saturday. Derek had a basketball game, just a regular season game. Nothing special. I had the regional finals for the academic decathlon, something I had been working toward for months. Guess which one my parents attended? They did not even pretend to be torn about it. Mom just said, "Derek needs the support more. You will do fine on your own." I won first place in my category. They found out 3 days later when a neighbor congratulated them. The message was clear from early on. Derek mattered, and I was just there to fill space. Any achievement of mine was met with indifference or criticism, while Derek's bare minimum efforts got standing ovations. After a while, I just stopped sharing things with them. What was the point? Derek coasted through college on our parents' dime, changing majors 3 times, and taking 6.5 years to graduate with a business degree he has never actually used for anything. He failed classes, retook courses, and generally treated higher education like an extended vacation. My parents paid every penny of his tuition, bought him a car for campus, gave him spending money, and covered his apartment rent. I worked 2 jobs while taking a full course load. I had a scholarship that covered most of my tuition, but I still had to pay for books, food, and my share of a cramped apartment with 3 roommates. I graduated in 4 years with honors in accounting and a job offer from a regional firm. My parents' response to my graduation: a single congratulatory text from my mom. "Congratulations. Do not forget Derek's birthday dinner is Saturday." That is it. No card, no present, no celebration dinner. Just a reminder to show up for Derek. By the time I was 22 and starting my career at the accounting firm, I had pretty much accepted my place in the family hierarchy. I was the reliable one, the one they called when they needed something done right, the one who would show up when asked and never complain. But I was never the one they celebrated or prioritized. Now here is where my parents' business comes into the picture. And this is important for understanding why they eventually tried to destroy my life. About 15 years ago, my dad opened Palmer's Hardware and Home Supply, a medium-sized hardware store in our town. It started small, just my dad and 2 employees in a cramped storefront. But over the years, it grew steadily. They moved to a bigger location, hired more staff, expanded into home improvement supplies and seasonal items. By the time I finished college, it had become a fixture in the community. The business was my grandfather's dream originally. Grandpa Palmer had worked in construction his whole life and always wanted to open a hardware store where working folks could get quality tools and honest advice. When he passed, he left my dad enough money to finally make that dream happen. Dad named it Palmer's Hardware in honor of Grandpa. My parents never really involved me in the business despite my obvious qualification. Derek was always their chosen successor, even though he showed 0 interest in actually working. He had some vague title like operations consultant, which basically meant he showed up when he felt like it, made grand pronouncements about things he did not understand, and collected a salary for doing nothing of substance. I offered to help with their books multiple times over the years. I was literally an accountant with expertise in small business finances. I could have reviewed their systems, optimized their tax situation, helped them with budgeting and forecasting, identified problems before they became disasters. But my dad always waved me off with, "We have got it handled, do not worry about it," or "Derek is taking care of that side of things." One time I actually sat down and showed my dad a basic cash flow analysis I had put together based on publicly available information about the store. I pointed out some concerning trends, suggested some changes that could improve their margins. He looked at it for maybe 30 seconds, said, "Interesting," and then changed the subject to something Derek was doing. Never mentioned it again. That analysis would have shown them they were heading for trouble 2 years before it became a crisis. But what did I know? I was just an actual financial professional. Derek taking care of the finances was like putting a toddler in charge of air traffic control. The guy could not balance a checkbook, let alone manage a small business's accounts. He would approve orders without checking inventory, give discounts to his friends without tracking them, and generally treat the store like his personal piggy bank. But in my parents' eyes, he could do no wrong, so clearly he was the right choice to manage their livelihood. About 4 years ago, I met Brianna at a friend's birthday party. She was beautiful, with this laugh that made you feel like you were the funniest person in the room. Smart, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in me as a person. After years of being overlooked by my own family, having someone actually see me felt incredible. We started dating and everything seemed perfect. She was supportive of my career, encouraged my hobbies, and actually listened when I talked about my life. She remembered things I told her, asked follow-up questions, seemed genuinely invested in my success. She said all the right things about my family situation too. When I would tell her about the latest example of Derek's favoritism, she would shake her head and say, "You deserve so much better. They do not appreciate what they have." She would come to my work events and charm my colleagues. She would plan thoughtful dates and surprise me with little gifts that showed she was paying attention. On my birthday, she threw me an actual party with friends, something my own family had never bothered to do. I thought I had finally found someone who valued me the way I deserved to be valued. Looking back now, I realized she was gathering information the whole time. Every complaint I made about my family, every detail about my finances, every frustration I expressed about being overlooked, she was filing away for later use. She was building a profile of me, my vulnerabilities, my relationship with my family. She knew exactly which buttons to push because I had shown her where all the buttons were. But I did not see that then. We moved in together after about 1 year of dating. Got a nice apartment on the better side of town, split expenses, played house like a normal couple. I was genuinely happy for the first time in years. I even started thinking about proposing, looking at rings during my lunch breaks, imagining what our future might look like together. Brianna had been spending more time with my family over the past 1 year or so. She would go to family dinners even when I could not make it due to work deadlines. She would visit my mom for coffee, help her with errands, build her own relationship independent of me. I thought it was sweet. I thought she was trying to bridge the gap between me and my family. What I did not know was that she was also building a very different kind of relationship with Derek, and it was not the sibling-in-law variety. About 8 months before everything blew up, I started noticing some weird things. Little inconsistencies that did not add up on their own, but created a pattern when you looked at them together. Brianna became more secretive with her phone. She would angle the screen away from me while texting, step out of the room to take calls, and claim it was work stuff, even on weekends when her office was closed. She started going to the gym at odd hours, coming home at 10 p.m., claiming she had done an evening spin class, even though she had never shown interest in spinning before. Then there were the changes with my family interactions. My mom started inviting Brianna to things without including me. "Oh, you are working late? That is fine. Brianna can still come to dinner." Derek was suddenly very interested in our relationship, asking pointed questions about how things were going, whether we were happy, whether I was treating her well enough. The first real alarm bell came about 6 months ago. I had a client meeting cancel unexpectedly on a Saturday afternoon, so I figured I would surprise Brianna. She told me she was visiting her sister, who lived about 2 hours away. But on a whim, I stopped by my parents' house first to grab a tool I had lent my dad months earlier. Her car was in my parents' driveway. When I walked in through the back door like I always did, I found her and Derek sitting very close together on the couch in the living room. They jumped apart when they saw me, that guilty flinch that people do when they are caught doing something wrong. "What are you doing here?" Brianna asked, and the way she said it, like I was the one who did not belong, should have told me everything. She claimed she changed her plans last minute and decided to visit my mom instead of driving all the way to her sister's. Derek said he was just there for lunch. My mom appeared from the kitchen and backed them up with this tight smile that did not reach her eyes. Everything felt off, but I could not quite put my finger on why. I wanted to believe them, desperately wanted to believe them, actually. The alternative was too painful to consider, so I swallowed my suspicions and let it go. Big mistake, huge. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention to everything. The late nights became more frequent. The secretive texts continued, the way Brianna would tense up whenever Derek's name came up in conversation. I started piecing together a picture I really did not want to see. Then one Thursday night about 4 months ago, I did something I am not proud of. Brianna left her phone unlocked on the nightstand while she was in the shower, and after weeks of growing suspicion, I finally looked. What I found made my stomach drop into my feet. Months of texts between her and Derek. Romantic texts, explicit texts, plans for their future together once they handled things with me. Declarations of love, inside jokes, discussions about how they could not wait to be together openly. But worse than the affair was what else I found. Conversations with my parents about some kind of plan involving the store. Messages like, "Once the insurance pays out, we will have enough to start fresh," and "He will not suspect anything, he is too trusting," and "This will solve all our problems." I took screenshots of everything, sent them to my personal email, then deleted the email from my sent folder, put the phone back exactly where I found it, screen down, just like she had left it. Then I sat there in the dark bedroom, listening to the shower run, processing the fact that my girlfriend, my brother, and apparently my parents were all conspiring against me for something involving insurance money. The smart thing would have been to confront them immediately. Maybe. But something told me I did not have the full picture yet. If I tipped my hand too early, they might adjust their plans, cover their tracks, find a new way to do whatever they were planning. So I made a decision that went against every instinct I had. I waited, watched, gathered more information. Over the next 3 weeks, I played the role of the clueless boyfriend and overlooked son perfectly. I smiled at Brianna, made small talk with Derek when he came around, visited my parents for Sunday dinners like nothing was wrong. But I was listening to everything, watching their body language, paying attention to who was texting whom and when. I also started doing some digging on my own. Through some public record searches and conversations with an old classmate who worked at the local bank, I pieced together a disturbing picture. Palmer's Hardware was not just struggling, it was drowning in debt. Years of Derek's incompetent management had run it into the ground. They had taken out loans, maxed out credit lines, and were facing foreclosure on the building within 6 months. I pulled the county records on the property, 3 liens. I checked the state database for uniform commercial code filings, multiple secured creditors. I even drove by the store a few times during business hours, counting customers, watching the flow of traffic. The place was practically empty most days. Whatever my parents were telling people about how well the business was doing, the numbers told a very different story. Instead of asking me, their son, the accountant, for help with their failing business, they decided on a different solution: insurance fraud. Here is what I figured out from the texts and from overhearing fragments of conversations over those weeks. They planned to burn down the store and claim it was arson committed by an outside party. The insurance payout would cover their debts and leave them with enough money to start over. Clean slate, fresh start, no consequences. They had even talked about using some of the money to help Derek and Brianna relocate somewhere warmer, maybe Florida or Arizona. But arson investigations are thorough. Insurance companies do not just hand over hundreds of thousands of dollars without asking questions. They send investigators, hire forensic experts, look for inconsistencies in stories. They would need someone to blame, someone to take the fall, someone whose motive would satisfy investigators and let them collect their money without too much scrutiny. Guess who they had picked as their scapegoat? The son they had been ignoring and belittling for 26 years. Me. The plan was actually pretty elaborate for a family of idiots who could not run a hardware store. They had been setting me up for months, and I'd been too focused on the Brianna situation to notice. Apparently, my dad had been telling employees at the store that I was angry about being cut out of the family business. He had mentioned to suppliers that his younger son had resentment issues and had made vague threats about the store. My mom had been dropping hints to relatives that I had been acting erratically lately and making concerning comments about feeling undervalued. Derek had been feeding Brianna specific lines to use against me if anyone asked about my mental state. They were building a narrative, painting me as the bitter, overlooked son who finally snapped and took revenge on the family business that had rejected him. Brianna's role was multifaceted. She was supposed to provide an alibi for Derek the night of the fire. They were planning to claim they had been at a concert together in another city. She was going to discover fake evidence pointing to me, something they would plant in our apartment. And after the insurance paid out and I was facing criminal charges, she and Derek would disappear together with their share of the money, leaving me to rot. The night they chose to execute their plan was a Thursday, about 3 weeks after I first discovered the texts. Derek was supposed to be at some business conference 3 hours away with Brianna as his assistant. My parents were visiting my aunt 1 hour in the opposite direction, establishing their own alibi. And me? I was supposed to be home alone in our apartment with no one to verify my whereabouts. Except I was not the gullible idiot they thought I was. Not anymore. The day before their planned arson, I went to the police, walked into the station with a folder full of evidence, and asked to speak with someone about preventing a crime. The desk sergeant looked at me like I was crazy until I started explaining what I had. The detective they assigned me was named Detective Shaw, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who looked like she had seen everything. She listened to my whole story without interrupting, reviewed the screenshots I had printed, examined the timeline I had put together. "Let me get this straight," she said when I finished, leaning back in her chair. "Your parents, your brother, and your girlfriend are planning to commit arson at your family's business tomorrow night, and they are going to frame you for it to collect insurance money." "Yes, ma'am, I know it sounds insane, but look at these texts." She spent a long time reading through everything. Her expression did not change much, but I saw her eyebrows go up a few times at particularly damning messages. "This is pretty explicit," she finally said. "They really discussed this over text? They are not exactly criminal masterminds." She almost smiled at that. "No, I guess not." She was quiet for another minute reading. "And you are sure about the timeline tomorrow night?" "Based on the messages and some conversations I overheard, yes. They have been planning this for months, but the actual arson is supposed to happen tomorrow between 2 and 3 a.m. Detective Shaw looked at me for a long moment, like she was trying to decide if I was legitimate or some kind of crank. Whatever she saw on my face must have convinced her. "Okay," she said. "Here is what we are going to do. I am going to get authorization to have officers monitor the store tomorrow night. We will have units in the area. If this goes down the way you say, we will catch them in the act." That night, I went to a hotel downtown, paid cash for the room so there would be no credit card trail. I was not taking any chances with my whereabouts. The room had a TV, a bed, and a window overlooking the city. I sat there watching late-night shows without really seeing them, waiting for my phone to ring, hoping I was right and also hoping I was wrong. At 2:47 a.m., my phone rang. "Mr. Palmer." Detective Shaw's voice was tight with controlled excitement. "You were right. We caught them." The relief that washed over me was physical. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. She explained what happened. Derek and another man, some friend of his, had shown up at the store around 2:15 a.m. with containers of accelerant. They had disabled what they thought was the only security camera and started the fire in the back stockroom. What they did not know was that officers were watching from unmarked vehicles nearby. The cops moved in the moment they saw flames, and the fire department arrived within minutes. The fire was contained to the stockroom and part of the back office before it could spread to the main retail floor. They arrested Derek and his buddy at the scene, caught red-handed with accelerant on their clothes and lighters in their pockets. The building was damaged but not destroyed. Insurance investigators would later determine the fire was definitely arson, and the security footage made it clear who was responsible. "There is more," Detective Shaw continued. "We've also brought in your parents for questioning. They were at your aunt's house like you said. But when we contacted them about the arrest, your father's reaction was telling. He immediately started making excuses for your brother before we even told him what the charges were. And there is a woman here claiming to be your girlfriend who is waiting in a car about 2 blocks from the store. She is asking for a lawyer. Brianna, of course. She was there. Could not even let Derek commit a felony without being nearby for moral support." The next few hours were a blur. I went to the police station, gave a formal statement, provided all my evidence officially. I watched through a window as the people I had trusted most in this world were processed one by one. My dad in handcuffs, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. My mom crying and claiming she did not know anything, her makeup running down her face. Derek looking stunned like he could not believe this was actually happening to him, the golden child who had never faced a consequence in his life. Brianna, mascara streaked and demanding to speak with someone in charge, still trying to manipulate her way out of the situation. My dad tried to spot me through the window at one point. When our eyes met, he started shouting something, but I could not hear through the glass. I did not need to hear it. Whatever excuse or plea he was making, I did not want to know. My parents tried the concerned parent act at first during their interrogations, claimed they had no idea what Derek was planning, that they were just as shocked as anyone, that there must be some misunderstanding. That lasted about 10 minutes until detectives showed them the text messages I had provided. The ones where my mom discussed the timeline of the plan in detail. The ones where my dad calculated exactly how much the insurance would pay out. The ones where they talked about how I would never see it coming. My father actually looked at the camera during his interrogation and said he was never going to amount to anything anyway. At least this way he would serve some purpose. Detective Shaw showed me that clip later. Said she had seen a lot of terrible parents in her career, but that one stuck with her. The evidence against all of them was overwhelming. And here is the beautiful part. The thing that really sealed their fate. My parents made one critical error in their genius plan. They forgot about the store's security cameras. A few years back when they upgraded the security system, they thought they had set it to only record locally, delete after 30 days, no cloud backup, nice and private. But they had messed up the configuration. The system had been quietly uploading everything to a cloud server the entire time. Every recording automatically backed up, stored for 2 years. Every conversation they had in the back office planning this scheme was recorded. Every time Derek and Brianna met at the store to coordinate details captured on video. Every piece of their conspiracy documented and automatically uploaded to a server they did not even know existed. The investigators found months of footage. My parents huddled in the back office, literally drawing diagrams of how they would make the fire look like arson committed by me. Derek and Brianna's romantic encounters in the stockroom between planning sessions. My father practicing what he would say to insurance adjusters. My mother researching signs of arson on the office computer, presumably so they could avoid leaving those signs. It was like they had filmed their own true crime documentary and then handed it to the prosecutors. On top of the video evidence, there were the texts, emails, and bank records showing money transfers between all of them as they prepared for their new life. There were web searches on my dad's computer for how insurance fraud investigations work, and arson detection methods, and signs of accelerant use. They had literally created a digital paper trail of their own crime. The case was so solid that the district attorney called it one of the clearest cases of conspiracy he had seen in 20 years on the job. They documented their own crime, he told me during one of our meetings. Every step of the way, it is like they wanted to get caught. The charges were extensive and serious. For my parents, first-degree arson, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit a felony, and filing false reports. They had already started paperwork blaming me before getting caught. For Derek, all of the above, plus obstruction of justice for trying to delete texts from his phone when he saw the police approaching. For Brianna, conspiracy, accessory to arson, and fraud. The legal process took about 10 months from arrest to sentencing. During that time, I moved out of the apartment Brianna and I had shared, found a small one-bedroom place across town, and threw myself into work. The criminal trials happened in February. I was there every day, sitting in the gallery, watching the people who had betrayed me face consequences for the first time in their privileged lives. The courtroom became almost routine after the first few days. Same seats, same bailiff, same court reporter, different witnesses, different evidence, but the same overwhelming proof of what they had done. My dad tried to maintain his dignity throughout the proceedings, wearing suits, sitting up straight, acting like this was all just a misunderstanding that would be cleared up by reasonable people. He had this look on his face like he still expected someone to step in and fix everything for him, the way things had always worked out before. That facade cracked hard when the prosecutor played the security footage of him explaining to Derek exactly how they would make me look guilty. In the video, my dad was laughing, actually laughing while explaining how my years of being overlooked would make me a believable suspect. He joked about how I would never see it coming because I was too busy being the responsible son to notice anything. He talked about how my resentment toward the family, the resentment they had created through years of favoritism, would make me the perfect fall guy. The jury watched. 12 people who had never met me saw exactly what kind of father I had grown up with. Several of them glanced over at me with something like sympathy in their eyes. His attorney asked for a recess after that footage played. My dad looked like he wanted to throw up. When they came back, he could not make eye contact with anyone. My mom cried through most of her testimony, playing the victim card as hard as she could. She claimed my dad had pressured her, that she was just trying to save the family business, that she never wanted to hurt me, that she did not understand the full scope of what they were planning. She actually said at one point that she always loved both her sons equally. Several people in the gallery audibly scoffed at that one. The prosecutor destroyed her on cross-examination, showed texts where she suggested specific ways to plant evidence in my apartment, showed messages where she coached Brianna on exactly what to say to police, showed video of her researching how to make the fire look like amateur arson, the kind an angry son might commit, showed her web search history, how to gaslight someone, making someone look unstable, signs of mental breakdown. The crying stopped after that. She just looked defeated. Her attorney did not even try redirect. Derek threw everyone under the bus in his own trial. His defense strategy was basically, "I'm too stupid to have planned this myself," which, fair point, but he was still the one who showed up at the store with gasoline and matches at 2 a.m. The jury did not buy the dumb act, especially after they saw texts where he bragged to Brianna about how he would finally be rid of his loser brother once the plan worked. Brianna's trial was separate. Her defense was that she had been manipulated by Derek, that she was a victim of romantic coercion. It might have worked if there was not video evidence of her actively participating in planning meetings, initiating conversations about specific details of the scheme, and generally being just as guilty as everyone else. She got convicted on all counts. The sentencing was satisfying. My dad got 8 years in state prison. My mom got 6 years. Derek got 7 years plus 5 years probation after release. Brianna got 4 years. When the judge read out my father's sentence, I watched his face go completely white. He looked at me from the defendant's table with desperate eyes and mouthed, "I am sorry." I stared back without expression and slowly shook my head. While the criminal case was pending, I did something my parents never expected. I sued them. With the help of a civil attorney named Tom Patterson, I filed a lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy to deprive me of liberty, and defamation. My parents had spent months telling people I was unstable, that I had made threats against the family business, all to set up their frame job. Those lies had spread through our community, damaged my reputation, and could have destroyed my career if things had gone differently. Tom walked me through every element of the case. The emotional distress claim was obvious given that my own family had conspired to send me to prison. The conspiracy charge was documented in thousands of text messages.
And the defamation? We had witnesses who had heard my parents spreading lies about my mental state, suppliers who had been told I was dangerous, employees who had been warned to watch out for me.
The civil suit also targeted the family business directly. When my parents started Palmer's Hardware 15 years ago, my grandfather had invested the startup capital. As part of that investment, there was a clause in the original partnership agreement. If any partner was convicted of a crime involving fraud against the business, their shares would be automatically forfeit. My grandfather had insisted on that clause. He had seen too many family businesses destroyed by one member's greed or stupidity, and he wanted protection built in. My parents had complained about it at the time, apparently, but eventually agreed because they needed his money. They had never bothered to remove that clause when Grandpa passed away. Probably forgot it even existed, buried in legal documents they never read. but their conviction for attempting to defraud the insurance company triggered it. And since I was Grandpa's surviving heir from that line of the family, and he had included me in the original partnership documents as a contingent beneficiary, I had a claim to those forfeited shares. Grandpa had specifically added that provision according to his old attorney who I tracked down. He had told the lawyer that he wanted to make sure the good one was protected if anything ever happened. Tom absolutely loved this case. They literally gave you the legal weapon to take everything from them, he said. Your grandfather saw who they really were and he planned for it. It is poetic justice. The civil case wrapped up about 2 months after the criminal convictions. With my parents facing prison and their assets frozen, they could not mount much of a defense. The judgment went entirely in my favor. Between the partnership clause and the civil damages, I ended up with full ownership of Palmer's Hardware and Home Supply. The very business my parents had tried to burn down to frame me now belonged entirely to me. When their attorney called to discuss the final settlement details, my dad apparently got on the phone to make one last plea. "It is your family legacy," he said. "Your grandfather started that business. You cannot just take it from us." "Grandpa would have wanted me to have it," I replied. "You tried to destroy me. I'm just returning the favor." I hung up and never spoke to him again. The store was in rough shape after the fire and years of Derek's management, but it was not beyond saving. The insurance company paid out for the fire damage. Ironically enough, since my family was not the one filing the claim anymore, I used those funds plus some of the civil judgment money to do a complete renovation of the damaged section, brought in a consultant to assess the business side, then started making changes. First, I let go of everyone who had been complicit in my parents' scheme. A couple of employees knew something was going on and had kept quiet. They were gone within 1 week. I kept the honest workers who had just been doing their jobs, gave them raises, and promoted a longtime manager named Rita to handle day-to-day operations. Then I restructured everything, renegotiated supplier contracts, updated the inventory management system, implemented actual financial controls and reporting, the kinds of basic business practices that should have been in place years ago. Within 6 months, Palmer's Hardware went from hemorrhaging money to turning a modest profit. Within 1 year, we were actually doing well. I hired 3 new employees, expanded our tool rental program, and started a contractor loyalty program that brought in steady commercial business. Last month, I officially renamed it. Palmer's Hardware is now Palmer & Sons, with a new sign out front. I put up a photo of my grandfather near the register with a small plaque explaining that he founded the original dream. 2 weeks ago, I got a call from the state prison. My dad wanted to add me to his approved visitor list. I declined. 1 week after that, a letter arrived from my mom, 4 pages of apologies and promises to make things right when she got out. I fed it through the shredder without finishing the first page. Derek apparently tried to call me from county lockup 3 times before his transfer to state prison. I blocked the number after the first attempt. Brianna's mother reached out through Facebook asking if I could find it in my heart to forgive her daughter. I blocked her too. My Uncle Pete, my dad's brother, who had always been the family black sheep, drove down to visit last month. We walked through the store together and he told me stories about my grandfather I had never heard, how Grandpa always worried that my dad was taking shortcuts, how he had specifically mentioned me in his will because he wanted to make sure I was taken care of if anything happened. "He saw what your parents were doing to you," Pete said. "He told me once that you were the only one in that house with any integrity." Guess he was right. Pete has been helping me with the store on weekends. Turns out he knows a lot about hardware from his years in construction. We're talking about making him a minority partner if things keep going well. I am dating someone new. Her name is Rachel, works at the coffee shop down the street from the store. We have been seeing each other for about 3 months now. She knows the broad strokes of what happened with my family, does not treat me like damaged goods. We are taking it slow, which is fine by me. The store had its best quarter ever last month. I hired 1 new full-time employee and we are looking at expanding into the empty unit next door. The landlord gave me a good deal on the lease since I have been paying rent on time, unlike my parents who were apparently 3 months behind when everything went down. So, that is where things stand. Reddit, my parents are in prison, my brother is in prison, my ex-girlfriend is in prison. I own the business they tried to burn down to frame me, and it is actually thriving for the first time in years. This story is not just one person's experience, but a mirror reflecting a highly common reality in our society. The personal details may differ, but the underlying lesson is a shared answer for many similar situations. Families are often romanticized as places of unconditional loyalty, yet in many homes the language of family unity, sacrifice, and standing by your blood can quietly become tools that excuse favoritism, manipulation, and even cruelty. When a household repeatedly rewards irresponsibility while dismissing integrity, it slowly builds a toxic loop. The favored child learns entitlement, the overlooked child learns silence, and the parents convince themselves that protecting their illusion of harmony matters more than facing the truth. In this story, that pattern stretched for years until desperation turned it into something far darker. A struggling business, a lifetime of favoritism, and the refusal to take responsibility led a family to choose deception over honesty, and ultimately to destroy the very legacy they claimed to protect. Stepping back from the courtroom drama and the shocking betrayal, what stands out most is not simply the crime itself, but the long chain of smaller choices that made it possible. When accountability is avoided for years, people begin to believe consequences are something that only happen to others. The golden child assumes someone will always clean up the mess. The parents convince themselves that bending the rules is just another form of protecting the family. And the quiet child, the responsible one, becomes the easiest target because responsibility is mistaken for weakness. But responsibility is not weakness. In fact, in this story it became the one force strong enough to stop the entire scheme. At some point, every toxic cycle reaches a moment where someone must decide whether to keep enduring it or to confront it. That decision rarely feels heroic when it happens. It feels terrifying, lonely, and often deeply painful. When I look at what unfolded, I do not see someone who destroyed his family. I see someone who finally refused to carry the burden of everyone else's lies. Exposing the truth was not revenge, it was a boundary. And boundaries, though uncomfortable, are often the only thing that prevents manipulation from continuing indefinitely. If you've ever grown up in a family where fairness seemed optional and loyalty was demanded without being earned, you know how difficult it is to step outside that system. You are told that silence equals respect, that confrontation equals betrayal. But sometimes the most honest act of loyalty, to yourself and even to the truth of the family's legacy, is refusing to participate in a lie. So here is the question this story quietly leaves behind. If the people closest to you were secretly building a plan that would ruin your life to protect themselves, would you still feel obligated to protect the family name? Or would you be willing to expose the truth, knowing that doing so might shatter the family forever?